Hello and welcome to Global Morning, a beautiful Saturday, I must tell you. Initially I thought the weather was going to be very harsh, but it turned out breezy and cool, and I'm really happy that I'm here, and also you're here with us on Global Morning. My name is Anita Patrick, and of course, as always, I don't do this alone. I have my co-anchor with me in the studio, Mukhtar Kasim.
Hi Anita, good morning. How are you doing?
I'm okay.
Yeah, the weather is really good. It's pleasant and it's nice, and we hope it's going to be a great day.
We look forward to having an amazing day because it's a weekend. For some of us, we have weddings to attend to, but for us, we're here to spice up the day.
Saturdays are supposed to be for weekends and sometimes Sundays, but of course, work goes on, and we're certainly going to be here to make sure that whoever is out there is having a great time even before the wedding, and watching us, and of course, giving them the best of the weekend.
Okay, so and of course, like we always do on the program, we have a whole lot lined up for you, and of course, Mukhtar will start with this review segment.
Certainly, we've got a lot of stories making the rounds, malaria and all of that, so that will come in the newspaper review alongside other trending stories, obviously.
Interestingly, today we have a whole lot to talk around the health sector that has to do with the World Malaria Day, like you mentioned.
Today is World Malaria Day.
Yes, it's World Malaria Day. I'll have a whole lot of discussions that will touch on the nitty-gritty on what we should do as a nation, basically,
because
to see how to
analysts have
tackle
been saying malaria is something that Nigeria should have gone past. If you look at the global analysis, Nigeria seems to have much of the burden, almost the highest case of malaria as you'll find in Nigeria here. And they've said a lot of interventions have come in, but we've been seeing results, but we've not been able to eradicate it or reduce it to the barest minimum. So those are the questions that have been asked, and our analysis, now our guest would give us a breakdown and an insight as to that particular discussion.
Well, while we look forward to having such engagements and seeing that we bring out the basic things that Nigerians probably need to pay attention to in the fight against malaria as we celebrate World Malaria Day today. And also at that, we also have a discussion around the very sensitive issues that has to do with the youth, which will come up as part of our programming today, which is the high intake of drugs by the younger
that's
people.
a very worrying situation, and it's something that affects, like you said, the youth, and it's one that you see has really affected the youth in a very negative way. You see them lose motivation. You see able-bodied men that's supposed to contribute to the nation development are struggling with addiction. So that's a very timely discussion also.
Amazing like that. We're just giving you a brief because we have a whole lot lined up for you. So please stick to your screen. Don't go anywhere. As we quickly start with the front page covers of the paper to tell you what's happening on the front page of the newspapers. Please stay with us. It's good to have you back and join us on this Global Morning discussion and breakfast program where we want to quickly tell you what's happening on the front page cover. Let's quickly tell you that we have Leadership newspaper, we have the Nation newspaper, we have Vanguard, we have Tribune, and we also have This Day, as well as others, as much as we can take for you today. But let's quickly start our focus with the Leadership Weekend. Leadership Weekend story leads with the front page cover, and it's boldly talking about the World Malaria Day. And I like the infographics that displays so we could really understand what is going on around World Malaria. And you see mosquitoes flying here and there, everywhere, and then you still disinfect. That is not, you fleet the houses because that's and yet you still see mosquitoes all over the place. But let's tell you, it says World Malaria Day, Nigerians battle soaring cost of malaria drugs. Then there's a writer that says poor Nigerians turn to herbs as malaria drug prices soar. That's on page 4. And then you see the malaria epidemic in Nigeria in infographics there, where it says there's a map, there's a world map there. That's and then it says Nigeria accounts for 27% of global cases. This is really not good for us. And then you have where it says Nigeria accounts for 31% adult deaths. And then you also have beside that where you have that very funny looking graphics there. I'm trying to make what it looks like, what exactly it is. It says global deaths in children. Oh, is that a child? And then what's that black thing that's showing? I'm trying to depict what that
looks like a stethoscope.
Okay, on the child, right?
Certainly.
Okay, so it says global deaths in children, Nigeria, there it says 38.6%. And that's a whole lot. And then if you look at below that, you also have where it says 24 million cases of malaria reported in the first 9 months of 2025. That's a whole lot. And just below that, you still see where it talks about the rising cost of malaria treatments in Nigeria. Funny enough, when one is feeling like a banging on the head, those are signs that tells you need to go run a test.
Certainly.
You need to check yourself.
Because one of the issues we've heard is self-med. Some of the reasons that the doctors have said why it persists is the fact that people, rather than going to run a test like you said, you assume it is this and then you start treatment. And of course you can see the burden is such a large one for Nigeria. And then one very worrying scenario is the fact that even medication for malaria is now very expensive. You've seen that it's prevailing and we're supposed to find a way to make it subsidized for people because it's something that is large. But then we see that it's more expensive and then people have got to turn to other herbs as an alternative.
Interestingly, you remember on the floor of the House, the House of Representatives, a lawmaker raised a motion where they should allow the herbs to be something that is allowed into, I think it was into pharmaceutical or something. I think
yes, they've been calls for alternative medicine, like they describe it, that it's something that could be helpful. But even though some other medical experts have said these medical herbs, if not regulated and consumed within duration within a particular sort of controlled environment, it has other consequences on our health, like the internal organs, the kidney and all of that. So it's a way to find a balance basically. I think I subscribe to alternative medicine because some of these malaria drugs, they are gotten from herbs and that's where they're converted to medicine. So of course we're going to just hope that we have a solution to the malaria burden of Nigeria.
Basically, we hope because 24 million is a whole lot of number for one to see a country go through the issue of malaria. Countries they don't even talk about.
The countries that they don't even know what malaria is. It's only when they come over to this client that they get malaria.
I've been beaten by something,
by mosquito, and
then they will tell you, "Welcome to Nigeria," or "Welcome to Africa," where we have mosquitoes and all. But hopefully, this gets out because, of course, with experts having this put out, it means solution should be on the way to curbing all of this. But let's also tell you other stories making around on the front page cover of the Leadership Weekend, which talks about above the masthead there. It talks about Boko Haram. Or let's talk about the coup first on the right-hand corner there, where it says coup, General Court-Martial begins, secret trial of 36 military officers. And that story is on page 6. And you also have below that, Mukhtar.
Below that we have a story that says Boko Haram threatened to marry off 48 Ngoshi women after 72-hour ultimatum. And that's an insecurity story, of course.
Mukhtar is actually 68.
Oh, that's 60. Oh, wow. that's 68.
That's a whole lot of number.
That's a huge number. And it's a worrying number, Anity.
Wow.
And away from that story, just a bit of entertainment, I think. It says, from stage to screen to stream, how Nollywood keeps rising. And details of the story is on page 22 of the Weekend Leadership newspaper.
Well, let's come below the masthead there where it talks about the foreign scene. There it says Kenyan president faces backlash for mocking Nigeria's spoken English.
That's a bit of humor for me, even though it's not really supposed to be funny, because I don't know why Kenya would be the country to mock Nigeria's spoken English. I'm not trying to compete or whatever, but I've heard Kenyans speak and I've heard Nigerians speak, and not because I'm a Nigerian, I'll take our Nigerian English over Kenyan English.
I don't want to talk about it.
It was funny because it was the president that was even making that statement.
So why would, anyway, that's the reason why we have the front page covers, so pick up and find out details to why he was being backlashed for that particular thing. Let's go below the infographics there. There's a story here just beside, on the left-hand side there. It says, Benue traditional ruler, wife, 3 others murdered. That's a bit of a very sad one.
And a very sad one.
And that's on page 8 of the Leadership Weekend.
Let's move away from that particular story. Just beside it in the middle, you see a story that says, FG unveils 10 billion Naira loan, full exit benefit for civil servants, with details on page 7 of the Weekend Leadership newspaper.
Okay, so just beside that one as well, you have where it says, police confirm adoption of medical doctor in Niger. That story is on page 15.
And of course, a bit of sport here. It says, how ex-Super Eagles star Eneramo collapsed, died during friendly match in Kaduna. Not a very pleasant one. And this story, the details you find on page 29 of the Leadership Weekend newspaper.
Well, a bit of sad one there for the sporting world, where we have an ex-international who we know has done well for the Super Eagles. Yeah, we wish his family the to bear the loss as well. And also for those kidnapped, we hope they get to find their way back to their families. Let's quickly turn our focus and look at the Nation newspaper. The Nation newspaper has its own lead story, a bit away from the World Malaria Day, from what we saw lead the front page cover of Leadership Weekend. It starts with 2027 politics, actually. 2027 scramble for tickets on Settles, Ogun, Oyo, Adamawa, Delta, others. And we have the writer that says Ogun Central APC stakeholders meeting deadlock over Amosun's ambition. We also have unease in Osun Accord Party over alleged plan to cede tickets to PDP defectors. And we also have another one that says zoning threatens to
the National Assembly. Says Natasha heads to appeal court, rejects 1 billion defamation judgment. This particular story, you find details on page 3 of the Nation's newspaper.
Okay, still talking on the Nation newspaper. Let's go above the masthead there where it leads. We've taken this earlier. We talked about the trial of the coup. Let's just go to the one on the right hand side where it says EFCC arrests ex-Sky Bank chair Ayeni over alleged 36 billion naira and $30 million fraud. That story is on page 2 of the Nation.
And of course, let's go below, and just below the Natasha story, it says FG increases allowances for civil servants. That's a pleasant one for civil servants.
Congratulations to every civil servant. So when we come to you at the end of the month,
do not tell us
smile.
There's no money when the federal government is showing you love.
So I hope the implementation takes effect so that we'll get to speak to us.
Certainly. Away from that story, a bit of a human angle. It says woman charged with cyber stalking Umahi for arraignment, April 29, and that story is on page 6 of the Nation's newspaper. Okay,
so that's much we can actually take on that because we have another story. I watch all other papers. Let's see what the Tribune, Saturday Tribune newspaper leads for us. The front page cover still leads on the Saturday Tribune, leads with its own story, talking about the coup story, leading the front page cover of the Saturday Tribune. It says, coup, 36 officers docked at military trial. And we have the writer that says, media barred from coverage, phones disallowed. And that story is on page 4.
And just below that story, not a pleasant one, even though I think we've seen it before, it says, gunmen kill traditional ruler, wife, son, 2 others in Benue, with details on page 3. And away from that, just below it, another story here says, third-party insurance, court bars police, FRS from imposing fines on motorists.
Okay, so let's calm down a bit and see some story that looks really touching there, human angle story. And then there's the picture there of a trailer, tanker accident there. I think I see a tricycle as well. And that looks like a bridge or a pathway. And we also have people mourning and crying. And then the writer says, the story leads there, says, "Where is my father? He left home this morning to fend for us. He can't be dead." And there you have the writer that says, "Daughter of tricycle driver crushed by petrol tanker in Ibadan cries at scene of accident." That's really, really heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking, Anita, and it's something that is
consistent.
It happens too much. This is not. It seems like it's not a deliberate act, because we know they say we know accidents are things that occur deliberately, but when it happens over and over and over again, what does that still an accident?
I had an encounter when I traveled to Benin, and on that road to Benin, from Abuja to Benin, the road is jam-packed with trailers. And I know at some point when the driver who was driving us in the vehicle, which I was part of, he had to find a way of maneuvering. The annoying part is the way they follow themselves back to back. Like there's the bumper to bumper kind of lineup. You struggle to find a way. So imagine when you have something to go for, the road is not easy for you. You have to find a way of maneuvering. And in some cases, what got to me totally was the young people driving, the drivers are very young people.
Certainly.
So sometimes I ask myself, are you them being too, what's the word
That's
now?
reckless, honestly.
You know, so I'm asking myself, who gave them the license to drive?
Some of them actually don't even have license. I remember an incident where one of them, an accident, I think it's Delta State thereabout, and it was discovered that that particular driver did not have a license. So those are things that the authorities have got to pay attention to, because we cannot keep losing lives over such incidents that, for me, has become more negligence.
I think this is one too many, and it's high time attention is paid to all of this, so that people will not need to lose loved ones due to things that are actually
very avoidable.
Very. So let's turn our focus and tell you all the stories still on the front page cover, because this one actually got to me, and we have a bit of business there beside the picture that has the IGP there on the left hand side. It says, "I sold raw rice beans in wheelbarrow to Max, my kidnapping business in Oyo," and that's the story on page 10. You know, it is becoming sad that you don't know who to help these days.
Honestly, because everybody, there is a potential that everybody can be.
And be careful.
Be careful. Because most of these people, they pose as legitimate businesses, but they're fronting for a real decoy for their own nefarious activities. That's why we have got to be really vigilant about our environment and the people we put in our cycle, basically.
Okay. Still talking about security issues, let's come down just below the earlier story of third-party insurance where Mutara had taken
There's a bit of a pleasant one. It says, "Police repel bandit attacks, recover ammunition in Sokoto," and details you find on page 6. And beside that story, just below it actually, "Politicians have been unfair to Nigerians." That's Archbishop Akinfenwa speaking.
Okay, and that's it with the Saturday Tribune. Let's turn our focus and look at what the Weekend Trust has with its own lead page cover. The Weekend Trust starts with the renewed hope, and it says slogan, policy, or campaign. And there we have the picture of the president. I think this should be citizens, from what it says.
They've been promised renewed hope, so this is the cake, the national cake of renewed hope.
And then there's an ambition under it. So the question is asked basically, is it just a slogan? Is it a policy, or is it a campaign that's looking at also? And then we also have that story on page 4. I'm sure when you pick up, you understand what this writer is trying to pass out.
And then you now make your judgment if it's a renewed hope, ambition, or whatever it is. Nigerians will decide for themselves, basically.
Yes, okay.
Drafting away from that story, just below the picture, you see a story that says unemployment, skills deficit, degree bias worsen crisis, with details on page 23 of the Weekend Trust newspaper. And still just below that story, it says 11 years after, how clean is Ogoni? That's the question, and answers you might find on page 9 of the Weekend Trust newspaper.
Okay. So we also have other stories making arounds there where it says Talking about Malaria Day, we have Malaria Day there, and it says rising treatment costs, prevalence deepen Nigeria's burden, story on page 20 there.
And then let's move away from that story. It says alleged coup, military begins trial of 36 officers. And away from that particular story, I think last story on this particular newspaper says, again, Emir Sanusi questions FG's borrowing after subsidy removal. Details you find on page 27 of the Weekend Trust newspaper. And away from the Weekend Trust paper, our next paper for review is the Guardian newspaper. The Guardian newspaper is the same story we've seen previously. It leads with the World Malaria Day story. It says, World Malaria Day, malaria defies medication despite ongoing eradications. And it has quite a bit of riders here. One of them says, kills 60,000 people in 2024. Nigeria bears highest global burden with 30.3% of deaths. Another one says, loses $1.1 billion yearly to scourge. Experts seek improved funding, community involvement to achieve goals. And the last rider says, Chevron pushes for stronger action against malaria. And away from that malaria story, let's go above the nameplates by your right. You see a story that says, discordant tunes trail FG's tariff cuts on food imports. A bit of business. And away from that story, it says, what happens to Tinubu's government oil competence, oil of national competence, that is, and that's an inside back page story that you find in the Guardian newspaper. And let's now come below the picture story by your left. You see a story that says, confusion as military bars journalists from covering trial of alleged coup plotters, pledges fairness.
All right, so we see a lot of story, and then of course we see the fact that talking about the earlier story, I'm talking about the infographics now, where we see that particular demonstration. You have the nets covering you, even despite you sleeping, but it's still not giving you
enough.
Is it enough? You know, those days in the boarding house, I used to have the nets. You know, I stayed in the boarding house. We had that, and then I know in campus, of course, I was off campus, but I still had people who still had the mosquito nets.
I stayed in campus for some time, and in the hostel for some time. Of course, we had mosquito nets also. It helped actually, but it didn't completely help because we still periodically came down with malaria.
But you're not going to still go to wrap the net
exactly.
and roll it up. So when you roll it up, of course the mosquitoes,
those things are just
they just hide somewhere, and they have a way of hiding. And then when you come back, they say, "Welcome home."
That's why these methods have not really worked over the past. So we need to get alternatives, more decisive ones that would make sure that this burden is reduced, like we said, to the barest minimum at least.
Okay, so we hope that that's pans out. But let's look at the last story there for that particular paper. Just by the left hand side there, it says, I have responsibility, just below there with the pink color there, it says, I have a responsibility to address Nigerians' housing shortfall, says minister. And then the writer says, you are fit for the job. Tinubu giving his affirmation, that's after he's been appointed as well.
So let's see him walk the talk. We know you are qualified, but
you know we have a housing deficit challenge,
a very huge one.
Huge one. So let's see, and we pray for him.
Yes,
that the
wisdom, we wish him well,
and
that he's able to translate his expertise into results.
Everyone that works with him will also guide him through the path, so he gets.
Because he cannot do it all by himself.
Of course, by himself, of course. And when we have just below that last story there on the bottom plate there, says Mark Ban petitions Mufwang says DSS over alleged killing, poisoning of cattle in Birkin Ladi.
The Plateau State.
That's Plateau State. The issue around the farmer headers issues there happening there with that story there. So that story is on page 3 of that particular paper. And up next for us, we'll quickly take our last paper that we can take for the day. And the last paper for the day, quickly, there is
the This Day newspaper.
So let's take the This Day newspaper. That'll be our last paper for this newspaper review segment.
And of course, it has a story that's business. A second order here says, report says war, drought, aid shortfall to fuel hunger in 2026. And away that story, we'll see a picture story here that says, Aliko Dangote emerges Nigerian Academy of Engineering Fellow.
Okay.
And that's the last
that story of particular this day newspapers, and that's a whole lot of stories making around. And then I'm sure when you pick up a copy of the dailies today,
you get the juicy details.
Juicy, because a whole lot of stories happening and a whole lot of interesting information you don't want to miss out. Certainly. Of course, as we build up into the weekend, use that to just hold to yourself. I know that.
Of course, it's a busy one. Keep yourself abreast of all the happenings.
Well, that brings us to the sides of the newspaper review segment. We hope that you get a copy of the dailies like we've dished out to you, and of course that's them there across all the sectors of the economy. There's a whole lot happening and you can't afford to miss it. Well, up next is our discussion segment and we'll take that. But before that, we'll quickly have our taste and texture. Taste and texture is where we bring you the breakfast. What a way to start your weekend. We want to tell you the amazing breakfast, and what a way to bring to you what we call the Nigerian akara. That's bean cake and pap. Please stay with us.
Wake up with Global Morning, your daily guide to what's happening and making the rounds.
We delve into headlines, newspaper reviews, spot-on analysis, policies, current events, real talk, real issues that affect us all.
From the latest trends to the debate, every topic, every angle, Global Morning is where it all starts.
Global Morning,
For the latest issues,
always on point.
watch Global Morning Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Saturday and Sunday at 8 a.m. on Global Television.
Hello everyone and welcome to Taste and Texture. Today we're going to prepare a delicious Nigerian delicacy and we will be demonstrating it from scratch. Our delicacy on this episode is beans cake and pap. I am your creative chef, Saadatu Garba. Beans cake, popularly known as akara, and pap is one of the traditional breakfast options in a Nigerian household. Akara and pap is a hearty morning meal for most homes because of its light and filling nature. It is a delicacy made from beans, while pap is made from maize. I hope you enjoy the recipe. Ingredients: beans, red bell peppers and scotch bonnets, onions, vegetable oil, salt and water. The ingredients for pap include pap, water, canned or powdered milk, and sugar. To prepare, wash and peel your beans. Add your beans, onions and peppers into the blender. Add a little water and blend till smooth. After blending, transfer into a bowl and use a mixer or a spatula to beat the mixture to make it fluffy. Add some onions to your oil to make it flavorful. Fry your akara in batches until golden brown and transfer to strain the excess oil. To make your pap, put the raw pap into a bowl. Add a little bit of cold water, then mix. Boil your water and quickly add into the mixture while turning to avoid lumps. Add your milk and sugar and your pap is ready. That's it on today's episode of Taste and Texture, and I hope you will try this recipe on your own. I'll see you again on the next creative recipe. This is Saadatu Garba saying take care of yourself.
Wake up with Global Morning, your daily guide to what's happening and making the rounds.
We delve into headlines, newspaper reviews, spot-on analysis, policies, current events, real talk, real issues that affect us all.
From the latest trends to the debate, every topic, every angle, Global Morning is where it all starts.
Global Morning,
For the latest issues,
always on point.
watch Global Morning Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Saturday and Sunday at 8 a.m. on Global Television.
At Witchtech Cables, we don't just make cables, we deliver excellence. Our products are built with advanced technology, trusted for their unmatched quality and durability. With a wide range of cables, swift delivery, and continuous innovation, we stay ahead of the market demand. We are proudly Nigerian, fully indigenous, yet world-class. Backed by a professional team, strong technical support, and a deep commitment to customer satisfaction. Witchtech Cables is more than a brand, it's a promise. Witchtech Cables, quality cables better than the best.
There you have it, taste and texture, of course. What a beautiful, beautiful Nigerian made delicacy there. As that's one meal I don't even joke about at all. What a way to have bean cake, where you have bean. Some people don't even like to eat beans at all, but there are different ways to make beans very interesting when it comes to watering them out. And there you have it. Chef walked us through the procedures and how you need to walk through from one point to another, from one stage of the preparations to another. And of course, on a Saturday like this, if you have nowhere to go to, if you have no activities, and of course earlier Mukhtar and I were talking about where Saturdays are meant for weddings, some relaxations, some like the indoors, where you need to have such kind of meal. If you finish taking such meal, find a cozy place and just lounge, just rest, because of course the weekends after the long day work activities of the week, where you've run from pillar to post, I like to call it pillar to post, you just need something very relaxing that gives you the long time for a nap to refresh, reset, and you of course you have a fresh start when all that is done for you. So with that being said, a whole lot is expected of us, and I know Mukhtar is already warming up and getting ready, because when it comes to the foodie side, he's always very excited to talk about that. And of course, I'm sure he can't wait to find out from our chef if there's still enough to go around, so we can prepare ours and get ours. So we also hope that with this idea was sold to you on Taste and Texture, that you will also be part of it and get something like that if you have nothing to go to. But if you have an engagement to go, don't try it, because it's going to make you feel sleepy and wanting to just sit back and relax. Please find out if it's something you want to try if you have a day to yourself this Saturday. Well, that's it on the particular Taste and Texture. We'll be bringing up our first discussion segment, and of course we have our guest who's standing by after this break. Please stay with us.
At Aerogym Shoe Factory, excellence starts from the ground up. Located at number 1 Pound Road behind Nigeria Correctional Service, Aba, Abia State. We produce 1,500 high-quality shoes every single day. Paramilitary shoes, safety boots, desert boots, ankle shoes, back-to-school footwear. All crafted with state-of-the-art equipment and built for strength, comfort, and durability. For reliable footwear that stands the test of time, choose Aerogym Shoes for better product, strong steps, smart style. For inquiries, call 091-264-53399 or 070-3009-3944 or 080-6573-8374 or call 081-3167-3668. Email info@aerogym.com. Website www.aerogymdesign.com. Aerogym. Walk with confidence. Walk with pride. Well, it was still here, and of course there's a whole lot lined up. Like we told you earlier in our discussion, we have a whole lot to bring to you, and we're looking at what it looks like when it comes to the world of drugs. Tana earlier gave a breakdown that it's been an alarming issue that needs to be brought to the front burner to talk about the drug crisis we have and how we can save the Nigerian youths following the challenges across. Well, let's welcome to this segment of the program. I'm still Anita Patrick, and of course I have Mukhtar.
I'm Mukhtar Kasim. Great to be back.
Mukhtar, I already gave a breakdown to the fact that breakfast was served, and of course let's go past that. We'll talk about it after.
This is where I will take too long, so let's just finish the issue.
We'll talk about it after we bring our guests. Well, there's a whole lot. Today we have on the focus where we'll shine the spotlight on the growing public health and social crisis, the alarming rise in drug abuse, especially among young people, Mukhtar.
And of course, from prescription drugs to illicit substance, this trend is no longer one that's hidden. It is something we see in our schools, in our communities and even in our homes, and it's quite worrisome because it's something that affects the future and it threatens national development, basically.
Well, we have a whole lot, so let's tell you about recent reports. The recent reports indicate that millions of Nigerian youths are either experimenting with or already dependent on substances, raising serious concerns about mental health, crime, and productivity. Mukhtar.
Then, beyond the statistics, we have real-life issues with young people battling addiction. We've seen it tearing families and them struggling to cope, and of course we see those young people and even their families dealing with the consequences of those actions that they have taken.
Well, looking at all of these things, we need to look at the impact, how this really affects the younger generation, because we keep saying we're the future leaders of tomorrow. So how do we tackle these concerns with drugs tearing the younger generation apart? Well, drug abuse doesn't just affect the individual, it spills into the society, fueling crime, increasing school dropouts, and also placing pressure on the healthcare system. And of course, this is something that needs to be dealt with, Mukhtar.
Of course, beyond that, even psychologically, it can lead to things like anxiety, it leads to depression, and in severe cases, we've seen them even have mental disorders, actually.
Okay, well, helping us to unpack all of this and bring us the expert knowledge on how we can deal with all of this, we're being joined by a clinical psychologist and the general manager of Vigada. I'm sure he'll pronounce it better for me. Vigada, in person of Godwin Alechenu, who will bring us up to speed on what is. Hello, Godwin. It's good to have you join us today.
Hello, thanks for having me. It's actually Vigada.
Oh, Vigada. Okay. Vigada. Okay. So let me get our audience to understand what Vigada means. It simply means Vanguard Against Drug Abuse. That's the acronym that is out there. So we understand. I was on my way to work, and I just had some of our colleagues talking about this, and it just touched me and dawned on me that this is one topic that needs to go not just with one trend of the media, it has to go across all fields. And I kept saying, who handles this better if not the Vanguard Against Drug Abuse team, who have done a fantastic job. Thank you so much for joining us on the program today. But let's quickly talk about some of the concerns being raised around drug, basically. Let's begin with Mukhtar.
I'd like to start with the basics. What exactly is driving the surge in drug abuse, especially among our young people in Nigeria here?
So when we talk about drug abuse, we're looking at prescription drugs, and we're talking about drugs that are not prescribed. So based on experience, a lot of individuals tell you that I am using substance because I want to be able to function in this aspect of my life. And so when that substance becomes a problem, you are not going with the prescription. One can now say that you are abusing substance. Now, substance abuse is the use of maladaptive drugs. Sorry, it's the use of drugs that causes maladaptive behavior, that impairs your sense of affect as an individual. Meaning that if you use medications that were not prescribed for you, and you continue to use that medication, there's every tendency that you begin to get used to that substance and it will affect your sense of affect, which is the sense that helps you to make rational decisions. I'll take you through the stages of addiction. Okay. Addiction doesn't just start like that. A lot of young persons experiment drugs rather, before they move to the regular use, before they move to abuse, and before they move to dependency. Okay. So you see that there is a pattern that these individuals go through before they finally get used to that substance.
Okay, well, looking at all of this, I see that because from the layman perspective, that is when it has been abused, when you're taking a hard substance or a practical medication, that's where they see it as an abuse. And it's good that you're a clinical expert, so you should to guide us through. So are there specific warning signs parents or guardians should look out for when they see behavioral change with their younger ones, especially with children? Because I think it's going from the teenage level now.
Oh, about 14.3 million individuals in Nigeria as of January 2025 abuses substance. Okay. So it's a growing public health concern. Okay. And so every individual needs to be on the lookout. Okay. If an individual is not affected, a family member is affected, or a community is affected. So drug abuse touches all facets of life. Now, for individuals, there are dynamics to it. you cannot use one individual to say because this individual isolates himself, these are the signs that this individual is using substance. Some individuals, based on their personality, their temperament, they usually isolate themselves, and so there are warning signs that are different from individuals to individuals. Yeah. So if you know an individual that withdraws from the family, from the society, and that could be a warning sign for that individual. Okay. So what I'm saying is the warning signs varies from individual to individual. So if you find an individual who is outspoken and no longer is outspoken, that could be a warning sign for that individual. Okay. So it means that we need to interact with individuals to be able to understand how has this person been behaving and how is this person also behaving now. So, like it said, drug abuse or substance abuse can predispose an individual to one mental health challenge or disorder. So what we call drug-induced psychosis. For example, there are individuals that use substance and they easily get predisposed to one mental health issues or the other, like schizophrenia. That could now be that individual acting in an irrational way. Okay. So when it gets to that stage, that is when people will now begin to say, oh, something is wrong with this person. Okay. And it becomes a warning sign. It has gotten to the stage where that individual needs help. And mind you, there are three categories of individuals that use substance. Okay. The individuals that use substance that has full insight. Those individuals will tell you that I need help, but I am not getting the help, so I need a professional to guide me through. The individuals that will tell you that I need this help, but this help is not important now, so they rationalize it. So it means that they have partial insight to whatever maladaptive behavior that they are into that predisposes them to using the substance. The individuals with no insight. Individuals with no insight are those ones that always be in denial, constantly be in denial and tell you that I don't have a problem, even when they see that
clearly everyone knows they have
it's very visible.
Yeah, and we have a general notion that substance abuse and individuals who abuse substance, they always have one mental health issues.
True.
So they will tell you that, look, I have an uncle that has been using substance and it's still
fine,
it's still functioning. So if you look at that individual, you'll now be able to understand that, look, it's not affecting his mental state, but it's affecting his relationship with people. It's affecting his finances. It's affecting one aspect of his life that he needs to or she needs to know that this is the effect that this substance has been able to affect me as an individual. So looking at the warning signs, you might use one warning sign for Mr. A, might not be the same warning sign.
So it varies across
so
the
it varies across different individuals. And we have the biopsychosocial model that talks about biological factors that can predispose an individual to using substance, psychological factors like depression, one emotional challenge or the other. And you're looking at the social factor. We are in a time and season where things are not so easy for people. So they just find a way to cope, what is known as escapism. So they use substance as a way of escape to live or forget that situation,
that reality,
and focus on
the happy
a part that feels that there is no problem at all, so that they can begin to function the way they were functioning. And that is a maladaptive behavior and a wrong coping mechanism to deal with situations.
One aspect I would like for us to also look at that is the psychological aspect, especially for young people. So what happens to a young person's brain when and their behavior when they become drug dependent? Because I hear it works differently for people who are much younger, people who are advanced in age.
So your brain forms at, let's say, from birth till at the age of 25. So
that's the formative period of your brain?
Yeah, the formative period of your brain. So if your brain if your brain develops at that stage till 25, so it means that the substance itself gets to affect how you tend to react, how you tend to think, how you tend to, and that's why I said it affects the sense of affect, right? The one that helps you to make rational decision. A lot of young persons now, based on experience, are experiencing schizophrenia, and there are different types of schizophrenia. So it means that at that formative stage that the brain is still developing, you're using a substance that is now impairing your sense of reasoning. And so when that sense of reasoning is being impaired, it means that you have to live on medication for
almost all your life? Are you restricting to say it?
So that also affects how they also behave and see life too.
Okay.
Most times when you come in for treatment, you're helping them as a psychologist. You're guiding them rather as a psychologist to make informed decision.
Okay.
But because that side of the brain is being affected, that individual may have to depend on medication so that he can understand that, look, this substance I am using is actually affecting me. And so the dopamine is a selfish neurotransmitter. I like to say that all the time. The dopamine is a reward center for every pleasurable activity we do. So for an individual who uses this substance, you always want that feeling of highness. You always want that instant gratification. And the dopamine will always tell you that I want this without letting you know that there are consequences attached to this.
Just tells you, give me more.
So the dopamine is that the happy, I know there's something called the happy, what do you call it? Something that helps
it's
you.
It's a neurotransmitter
that helps your
every
brain
activity
system.
you do as an individual. The dopamine is that reward center, is that neurotransmitter. The serotonin to plays like a similar role, but the dopamine is the reward center for every pleasurable activity you do. Be it drug abuse, be it any other pleasurable activities that you're engaging. And again, lately we've discovered that aside drug abuse, gambling addiction too, a lot of young people, aside using substance, we are beginning to see like in comparison between drug addiction and gambling addiction. There's a correlation in our modern times now, and a lot of young people, aside drug abuse, are gradually going into gambling addiction, and that's also something that we need to discuss here. Pathological gambling.
Okay, so maybe we need to find time, but let's still stick to the drug issues, because that's where across Nigeria, from the north, to the east, across, we see young people being drowned in this particular phase. So we often hear issues around peer pressure, but are there deeper societal or should we call emotional triggers behind this substance abuse? Because yes, you've mentioned, you've just given us a new dimension, to that. So is it just about influence of people, that because someone could be a normal child in the sense that has good upbringing, but the moment he steps into school or gets into a peer group where they are, something links to something. Maybe, like you said, the dopamine is a neurological thing that helps them want to feel happy. Maybe your parents scold you on something and you feel you've grown, you've gotten into adolescence age. Some things should be normal in your own way. So is it just that peer pressure? That's what I want to get us out of there, or societal some worries we should look at.
All right, so we have a model known as the P's, right? So we are looking at predisposing factors.
Okay.
My years of experience in practice has opened my eyes to the fact that a lot of people have trauma issues, a lot of people have one psychological issues that they don't get to interact with people about. They keep it on the inside. So these factors can predispose this individual to sourcing for a coping mechanism to be able to deal with that situation.
Okay.
Let's say an individual was raped. That individual wouldn't, if that environment is not safe for that individual to open up, that individual wouldn't open up. That individual will find a maladaptive coping mechanism to deal with that situation, so that he or she will suppress, deny, or just repress that thought. So a lot of young people, or a lot of people who use this substance, are either because of one issues that they've had, or peer influence, like you've said. I'm also going to explain the protective factor. I'm also going to explain the precipitating factors. Now, in one of my therapy sessions, group therapy sessions, I asked the question, can anyone smoke or drink in a church or mosque? And he said no. I asked why. He said, no, we can't do that.
That's the only place.
So that's a protective factor, a healthy protective factor. So an unhealthy protective factor could be your environment.
Okay.
And if you're looking at your environment, you're looking at the place, the situation, the time, the people. So if you're mingling with people that abuses that substance, you find it very convenient and comfortable to use the substance. Why? Because that place becomes a protective, unhealthy protective factor for you. But a healthy protective factor is a church or the mosque that you can't even use. So environment plays a very critical role in even substance use for individuals. A lot of people will tell you that if I leave this environment, I'll stop smoking. But if I continue staying in this environment,
I can't quit.
And sometimes our cultures too. Yeah, I've had therapy session with someone that for up to like a while he was in denial, and he said, "See, when they gave birth to me, they gave me alcohol to test." So there's no way that my people will say I should come for treatment and they say I should stop.
Because it's nothing out of the ordinary for
yes.
So it's a normal lifestyle.
It's a normal lifestyle.
Okay.
So our intervention would be that that individual leaves that environment and comes to another environment that he will not have access to this. So we're looking at the protective factor, the predisposing factor, the perpetuating factor. That individual may likely want to continue using the substance or being in that behavior because he or she feels that in order for him to or she to survive, that individual needs to be on that substance. Lifestyle. We have celebrities that always use substance.
They model after.
Yeah, they tell you that when I want to get inspiration, I use this substance. And so when they continue using that substance over time, and you see they pass this ideology to younger people, and people begin to copy the trend that, if you actually want to be productive, you actually need to be on this substance.
I've actually known someone who keeps saying, I can't get on the stage except, the clear eyes.
Yes, and there are individuals that...
Does it start with stage fright? Because it's normal for you to have stage fright. It's normal for you to be...
And that is where they need the help of a professional to be able to deal with that psychological problem. Because if you don't deal with that psychological problem, you employ the use of
the substance.
Unhealthy coping mechanism. Substance use is an unhealthy coping mechanism to deal with these issues. And so individuals do not know. So they employ the use of unhealthy coping mechanism to help them deal with that situation. So there's something known as a placebo effect. Yeah, so sometimes the substance may not even get them high, but because they believe that it's real. They have that belief. The mind is very powerful, so they believe that
plays a trick on them.
Yes, and they just feel that if I take this and I'll get to perform well.
So what you're saying, if they had that mindset, even without the drug, even with the possibility to perform in that.
So if the drug is not even doing the job it's supposed to do, it's just the mind basically.
It's the mind, and people sometimes come for therapy sessions and say that they haven't slept for like days because of this. I'm not going to mention because they're on TV. I'm not going to mention the use of the substance or the name of the substance. But there are substances that don't make them sleep at all because they want to function and they want to be productive. Maybe they need to stay out all through the night to be able to work and all. So these substances affect these individuals, but they feel that they are getting the reward. The reward that they are getting is not a positive kind of reward because for every behavior there's always a reward and there's always the consequences, and that's why we have the ABC, the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. So whatever behavior that you're putting in or you're putting out there, there's always a consequence at the end of the day.
Okay, let's look at it from beyond the individual level of it. I want to see from a societal point of view. We've seen increase in crime rates, increase in behaviors that are not conforming with normal behaviors, and we've heard that there's a nexus between such behaviors like crime rates and drug use. Is that a fact, that there's a nexus between drug use and the increase in crime rate and all of these negative things we see in society?
Okay, so I didn't state that addiction is a brain relapsing disorder, which is characterized by impulsive and compulsive use. So it means that if you have $1 million in your account, because of the that addictive nature, you might even use that $1 million and not think that you've spent much money. So that can predispose that individual to looking for extra means to want to get that substance. Now, addiction is a brain relapsing disorder. It means that that individual might be compelled to use when the cravings set in. That individual might use that substance, not even might, the individual will use that substance based on impulse. When you develop a behavior over time, it becomes part of you. And so when it becomes part of you, you always want to satisfy that cravings. And so it can predispose individuals to getting into crimes just to be able to satisfy that cravings or that addiction. So there's a correlation between drug abuse and increased crime rate. And so a lot of people, whenever they come for treatment, they in quote, they think that they are being punished for their behavior. And of course, if you get to hear their stories, you really feel bad for their loved ones and parents, because millions of items belongings that are being sold just to be able to sustain that lifestyle. And most times they don't even see that what they are doing is wrong. They always rationalize whatever is it that they are doing, and they say, if they don't give me the money, who is going to give me? If I don't sell this property, who is going to sell the money? Someone, as funny as this may sound, I was having to have this session with someone, and he said he was craving for his substance, and there was no money, there was nothing to sell. He carried the gas cylinder that was filled with gas. Yes, he sold it for 5,000 naira. Whereas the gas that was inside was even more than
the 5,000.
So are you now saying that individuals that use substance, they can go to any length to be able to satisfy that cravings at that point in time? And cravings, always tell them, it doesn't last. If you're able to manage your cravings, you will now realize that look, you have power over these cravings that
they don't control you control them.
Because addiction is a brain relaxing disorder that is hinged on the compulsive and impulsive use. You will not even think about managing your cravings. You just want it at that point in time, and so they can go to any length to be able to satisfy that feeling.
Wow! So I can imagine where someone has to sell that cylinder. This is really filling the
how expensive.
That's one. I know. Many stories.
I'm just playing in my head right now to imagine where what they're supposed to use to cook for you.
Yeah, the brother came back and he was sitting there smiling, like looking for what to take next.
Oh my God. Anyways, you talked about the environment and how this environment plays a safe role for these individuals to find a balance. So I wonder what roles do schools and communities play to enable us them cope this particular crisis? If the church and the mosques, for them, is seen as a forbidden place to do such thing. But in schools, we have these issues come up every time. So what should the schools do to curb this menace? Because this is a menace that needs to be dealt with.
So the organization I work with, Vanguard Against Drug Abuse, is a non-governmental organization. Yeah, so we focus on, so we have the treatment arm and we have the NGO arm.
Yeah.
So the NGO arm focuses on advocacy, reaching out to individuals, schools. So we've done like countless outreaches to schools. So we always entreat that we catch them young, not secondary schools anymore, but from primary schools. Based on experience, we've had individuals who have used substance at the age of 9, 10, in fact even 8 years. So we're not looking at secondary schools anymore. We're looking at starting from primary schools, looking at moving from primary schools, secondary schools. Of course, the university system is one that those individuals would want to experiment based on the explanation I gave about stages of addiction. Yeah, so they would definitely want to experiment. We are looking at how we can begin to sensitize these individuals from the primary school, informing them about the dangers, the effects of substance use. If you don't sensitize them at that formative stage, they might, because of the peer influence, and a lot of these young ones have issues with identity. Yeah, so they might want to think that for you to be able to be like a particular kind of person, you have to be on this substance again. And so we also stretch our advocacies to parents and families, to explaining to them and also sensitizing them on how to identify early warning signs and how to identify ways to be able to help individuals or family members that are into substance use. So for primary schools, these individuals, they most times have much idea about substance than you think we don't know. They have in depth. Yeah. So an individual will tell you that this is alcohol. Alcohol is not bad.
And despite I'm looking at you and I'm wowed, because we have substances in terms of the alcohol, like you mentioned, where the age is put there 18. And yet, even an individual who is 9 years in primary school already knows the difference to say this is this. That means not so exposed.
Yeah, a lot of these children get exposed even at the family system.
Okay.
Your father, your mom, an uncle, an auntie takes alcohol.
And though it's not for children.
It's not for children. They send you on an errand to go get
this stuff.
These things. And so you want to experiment. What is this thing that this
taking
is taking? So it makes advocacy very difficult because this individual is already exposed. In fact, someone came for session the other time and said that, see, everything you are saying now is not making sense to me, because the first position I took, that's him for him now, the first position he took was when he was in primary 2, and the father bought him a bottle of beer to celebrate that. Yes, primary 2. So you see that we have a lot of work to do, not just going to schools anymore, but we also need to begin to talk to families, for them to be able to understand that this is a growing concern. And again, family dynamics too is a worrying concern. A lot of families are tearing apart, and children are now beginning to see that the way out is for them, because someone else is saying that my father takes alcohol, comes home, he sleeps. They will now say, okay, let me experiment.
Let me try that.
Let me try that. And the vendors, they don't ask questions. So I think we need to begin to put in laws that regulations that we enforce that children don't have access to these things. And even at that, there are family members that are also being careless. Someone will keep a certain kind of illicit substance, and the child tests it, and he feels that that's the way out, and he goes back to continue testing it without the dad being in the know.
That's the beginning of that child's addiction.
That addiction. And years after, he begins to blame the dad for that.
Yeah, to say it was you I saw. Children is big
habits.
Example, big habits with what you do, not really what you say anymore. So I think that's really a concern. But Musari wants to talk about.
Now let's talk about.
So we need the media to also do more
sensitization and all of that.
One of
the reasons, that's one of the reasons we're having here.
More programs so that they can know the effect of the use of substance, even at that formative stage. Yeah.
Let's talk about the solution, because we've seen people going to rehabilitation and therapy. Sometimes they come out reformed. Other times we tend to see that they have a relapse. So are these sessions really helpful? And why is it that when we see some people come out, some get better and others even get worse off sometimes? And what's the permanent solution to treating that particular situation?
I'll say as a professional, the solution to substance abuse is don't start.
Don't even start it.
Don't even start. Because like I said, it's a brain relapsing disorder. It's a disorder. Yeah, so it's a problem already. So if you start, it means that you have to be intentional about your recovery. And you talked about relapse. Relapse don't just happen. There are stages of relapse. Yeah, so you have the emotional stage, you have the mental stage, and you have the physical stage. So for an individual who has been through the rehabilitation system, that individual would understand his triggers, internal triggers, and also external triggers. What are your internal triggers? Identify your internal triggers, identify your external triggers. Side by side with your therapist would now be able to guide you through on making informed decisions. And that is why most times when they come in, we psychoeducate them a lot for them to know the effect. But you see where relapse comes in. Relapse don't just happen, like I said. Relapse. When you experience a lapse, then it moves to relapse. For some individuals,
you said you experience
a lapse
before the relapse. What's the difference?
A lapse is a single use.
Okay.
Relapse is continuous use.
Okay.
So for individuals who experience lapse, they don't seek help. They become helpless. There's a term known as learned helplessness. So they learn how to be helpless. I'm going back to my previous environment. I'm going back to the same family dynamics. My parents are not together. I have not been able to deal with these. Or there are factors that they didn't deal with. Yeah? And when they now have like a trigger, it predisposes them to having a relapse or a lapse. So for you not to be able to experience a relapse and lapse, you should be able to make that informed decision. And there are stages of change. You have the contemplation stage, you have the pre-contemplation stage, you have the contemplation stage, you have the preparation stage, you have the action and maintenance stage. In some school of thought, there is a relapse at the end of the day. At the end of it, meaning that if you become too confident on that maintenance stage,
you might have a relapse.
So most individuals are either on pre-contemplation stage or contemplation stage. If you remember, I talked about individuals that rationalizes substance, individuals that are full insight, individuals that have no insight. So most times when they come for treatment, they get to that preparation stage. And when they get to action stage, they feel that they don't need help anymore.
I'm already clean.
So when you come to the rehab system, you find out that you're preparing these individuals, you're not exposing them to the triggers and all of these things. So they will tell you that I have made that informed decision not to use substance anymore. And so when they are out of the rehab, they are meant to do like a post-discharge follow-up therapy sessions, so that individual will be able to come and tell the therapist this is how far I have gone, these are the challenges. And most cases, they don't come back. And so the why is meant for them. Even when you try to reach out, they tell you, now better. You've taught me everything I need to know.
So it becomes more.
So
and if you don't do that follow up, that is what might eventually lead to that relapse.
Yes, because when you're doing the follow up, you're coming for test, we test you, we are more like your accountability partner.
Yes.
And we are saying that look, you need to do this for a time being, for a time frame, so that we can be able to track and monitor how far you're going with your treatment. We always say that sobriety is a journey that does not have a destination. Meaning that if you're on that journey, you don't have to say that this is the end of my journey. Because the moment you get to the end of the journey, that is the maintenance stage. Relapse is just waiting for you there. Like I said, there are stages of relapse: mental, emotional, and physical. When you get to the end of the journey, in quotes, you will now experience a lapse or a relapse. So it means that in sobriety, there is no destination to your journey. Your journey is lifetime. If you're 20 and you're on sobriety, you'll be on that journey till the end of your life.
Wow.
That's a whole lot.
And that's why I said
Don't start at all.
That's the best solution.
So I like the fact that you are doing an amazing job from your perspective, from what you look at from adolescents.
Recommendations from our end and also from NDLEA. So we're working hand in hand based on number one, stemming the tides of drug abuse in Nigeria. We're also looking at advocacy, how we can partner with both agencies to see how we can reach out to communities that these informations have not been reached out to. And you know, when you hear NDLEA, what have not been reached out to. And you know, when you hear NDLEA, what comes to your mind is arrest.
Enforcement.
Yeah, enforcement. So NDLEA works with organizations so that when they hear NDLEA, these organizations also go there to be able to, in hand with NDLEA, to be able to see how we create more awareness and all. And NDLEA is really doing an amazing work. We've had partnership with NDLEA for the longest now, and we've been doing really great community outreaches in partnership with NDLEA too, and also the support in advocacy and treatment too, where need arises too.
Now, from your point of view, you're one who has seen this for a number of years. From everything you've seen and all the work you've done, if you had to give us a one-sentence call to action or solution for whether government, individuals, what would be that particular call to action for you?
I have so many. So
just go ahead. As much as you can.
Exactly.
We need to pay attention to drug abuse. Drug abuse is not a death sentence for individuals. We need to stop the stereotype. We need to stop the criminalization of individuals that uses substance. We also need to help individuals who are using substance. Like I said, I didn't talk about the drug-induced psychosis for these individuals. So imagine the drug has now predisposed you to having a mental challenge. You have a mental challenge, you have a mental disorder. So it moves from mental challenge for individuals and lands at mental disorder. Like an individual is dealing with depression. We talked about depression and anxiety.
Yes.
Like sister said, they share like similar symptoms. And you're now moving to a stage where you now have to be on medication, like schizophrenia, bipolar, affective disorder, and all of those things. So we need to treat individuals that are using substance as humans that they are. We should stop punishing.
Because, like you said, was there a particular reason why they are looked with this criminal mindset, and why is there a need for them to be looked? I know, of course, I want you to talk about it in a professional way. We should not look at them as criminals, but as people who need this help that society has looked at them as previously.
Well, you wouldn't blame people who look at them because of what they've been through the hands of these individuals who use substance. Yeah, so an individual who uses substance, like I said, in most cases do not have insight. And so someone who do not have insight will always act based on impulse. And if that individual acts based on impulse, he's not putting the emotional side of him or
the rational side
in place. So you see, that sense of making rational decision is no longer there. So people who are not professional would use punishment as a way to correct that behavior. If you use punishment to correct that behavior, that individual may hurt you, say your mental state. It is not your father that is
suffering mental issues.
But of course, it's actually going to also affect the parents because they will not see their loved one go through suffering. That kind of suffering.
Sharing that burden.
Yeah, so a lot of them don't even get to experience a happy life when the loved ones experience substance use disorder.
Most definitely.
There's a whole lot that I see where you do walks, you go around and then you talk about the mechanism to find a way of follow up to bring them back to the fold. Because of course, you are doing this to ensure they are stable and they are healing, basically, because it's a mental disorder. So
let me create the impression we often refer to them as drug users.
Okay, not abusers.
So if you call an individual drug abuser, that individual might begin to feel labeled.
Okay.
Yeah. So to your question, success rate here is good for those individuals, and so we always entreat that individuals who cannot have access to the conventional type of treatment should be able to utilize the community rehab system.
Insight to all of this. I'm sure we've picked a lot, Mukhtar, because for me, I saw it from a different perspective, and it's good to have experts like this speak to this issue. But let's tell you that drug abuse is not just a personal struggle, it is a national concern that requires collective action.
And of course, prevention, awareness, and access to rehabilitation are key to safeguarding the future of our young people.
And of course, we want to say a very big thank you to our guest who has done an amazing job. You've added value and we cannot take it for granted. Thank you so much. Gordon Elechenu, who's the clinical expert on this. I listen to you from a psychological point of view and I see that you have a way around the words to picking this issue and guiding them through. So we say kudos to your organization. We say well.
Wake up with Global Morning, your daily guide to what's happening and making the rounds.
We delve into headlines, newspaper reviews, spec us all.
From the latest trends to the debate, every topic.
Watch Global Morning, Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. Saturday and Sunday at 8 a.m. on Global Television.
In an age of breaking news, you need a trusted source that prioritizes accurate, factual, and unbiased reporting. This is AM News, and I am Ubong Osoro.
On Global Television, our news is rooted in verified and authoritative storytelling that keeps you educated, informed, and enlightened on all the issues that matter to you. I am Sadia Yakubu. This is Midday News.
You can trust our multi-platform news broadcast real-time and fast-check stories for all the big local and foreign headlines round the clock. I am Ramsey Enoch Agbo. This is News Express.
Our array of anchors delivers the news to our teeming viewers, breaking it down with context and perspective. This is News Cycle on Global Television. I am Anieti Patrick.
And the flagship news is your hub for the day's most engaging stories. This is News Prime, and I am Jumai Manson.
Did you miss any of our news rounds? No worries. Catch up at 10 p.m. and midnight, 7 days of the week. I am Mukhtar Kasim.
Global TV is on DSTV channel 365 and Star Times channel 276. We're active across all social media platforms at Global TV NG.
Global TV News, accurate and unbiased. I'm Uyi Agmofwebe.
At Witchtech Cables, we don't just make cables.
Second discussion segment where we have a very focal discussion to talk about today is World Malaria Health Challenges, especially in Nigeria. Mukhtar.
Absolutely, and that's despite years of awareness campaigns, mosquito nets being provided, and treatment efforts, malaria still remains a major concern for millions of Nigerians.
And of course, when we had our newspaper review segments, we had a breakdown to the millions of people affected with malaria in Nigeria. But this year, the conversation is shifting beyond just awareness to ask deeper questions. Why does malaria still persist despite everything we know as a people and as a nation?
Most definitely. And joining us to unpack this conversation is Dr. Osabohen Matthew Oko. He's a medical doctor and a metabolic health expert. He's also a public health researcher and a member of the WHO FIDES network of health influencers. Thank you so much for joining us on the
Thank you so much, Doctor.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, it's good to have you here. Let's start from the basics and look at this malaria because it's been one talk that needs proper engagement beyond just the awareness, because every year we talk about the World Malaria Day. So let's start from malaria. Has been around for decades and there's a whole lot of awareness. From your perspective, a major issue in Nigeria today at this time of 2026?
Well, the thing is, Nigeria happens to be, in a climatic zone that favors the growth and multiplication of the vector, that transmits the parasite that causes the infection. So I think that is one thing that is going for the malaria, the climatic nature of Nigeria. So across, just very few places where you have very high altitude and very cold temperatures, that you do not have mosquito doing very well. But across the country, so long as we continue to have mosquitoes around, we continue to have this issue of malaria continue to be with us.
So the problem, you've mentioned our climate, but is it just the climate, or would you also say that behavioral attitude of the individuals and even the systemic challenges we face are part of the problem?
Yeah, so of course, just like people drive around, right? And then when you drive recklessly, or there are obstacles that are unseen, or the road is bad, then there's tendency for accidents to happen, right? But those are due to human factors. So the same thing, can also happen here, because that we have mosquitoes around does not mean that there's nothing that people can do to keep themselves from being bitten. Because if you don't get bitten by an infected female Anopheles mosquito, then you're unlikely going to have malaria. So definitely, what you have said about human behaviors, and then what we also need to do systemically is also a big a big factor, if I can put it in that way. For example, if mosquitoes there are now, apart from water bodies around generally, within our local environment, if we are able to keep mosquitoes away from breeding, then we probably will not have mosquitoes close to us, right? Yes. Now, if you prevent mosquitoes from coming into your house, mosquito will not bite you, right? If you flit your house every now and again, mosquito will not bite. If you sleep under insect bed net, you're unlikely going to be bitten by mosquito. If you use insect repellent, if you wear clothes that covers your body, particularly in the evenings, even though mosquitoes are beginning they're changing their behavior, as we see, and then even the way the
daytime.
Yeah, so even before it gets mosquito, we normally whatever mosquito when it gets dark. These days, even before it becomes very dark, mosquitoes are already around. So they are changing, apart from changing their behavior, they also becoming resistant to insecticides, even becoming resistant to medication that we use. So there's just a lot of challenges that are contributing to the continuous challenge that we have with malaria.
Okay, so let's look at Nigeria as a nation, where when we talk about Nigeria specifically in terms of the malaria challenges, percent of the way it accounts for in the